Well, hey there, Dynamics and Simulation students. This week, of course, week 4 of the course, we're going into this idea of exploring a new topic inside of Dynamics and Simulation, inside of Maya, known as Dynamics Cloth or Encloth. Of course, you can go through the course shell and see I've got some different tutorials here, different videos and links to actually look to see how they work. For instance, how to work with it inside the Arnold renderer for texturing and shading and lighting. How to even create a flag and different. Now this one here, which is the PDF document, this is the one that I basically have loaded up here, and you can see what this basically is. Again, it's another one of my old tutorials that I've written a long time ago, so there is some differences here. But it's pretty much a nice breakdown going all the way back to Maya 2009. Now the first part of the tutorial talks how to make even like a moving curtain, how you can make an animated curtain. Now again, part of the exercises within this class is not just making the in-class assignments that we've been doing so far, but before the end of the quarter, to actually do at least 2 additional uses of all these different dynamics. So even though this starts with doing the curtain, if you scrub on down through here, eventually you get to how to make a flag, okay? Making an animated flag. It's a pretty simple little tutorial, and that's what I'm going to talk about doing today. So if we walk through this, okay. Now again, building the set. So first we have to build the floor, the objects, and so on. But remember, before you ever get started in Maya, you want to actually, okay, so here I am getting started. Remember the basic process of, okay, expand the time. You could even give it a little bit more time like we realized with the catapult. Right, so we have a little bit more time to deal with. Make sure that our playback speed, which is the little running man in the bottom right, is at 24 and play every frame. And of course, File, Project Window, New, and we would name this, of course, being what the project is, which is the flag project, and given it the proper location to save it, which is, of course, going to be, if we create a project folder, here's our banner flag, I'll select that, and I'll hit Accept to create every single one of these folders. Now, this is a good reason, too, about why we're going to choose those folders. Is because some of the other things we're going to need eventually, even though we don't need it right now, but we're going to need some kind of flag, okay? So this is also going to be a little bit of exercise about how to apply a texture map or an image to a plane. And so no matter what flag you want, let's just deal with what I had before. I'll say pirate flag, okay? And I'm just looking for a JPEG that represents a pirate flag. Let's just go with, didn't set anything there representing. I'm just looking for, well, we could do a red one. Why not? Let's go with this one. Okay? Now, I'm going to simply just right-click and open that image in a new tab, which allows me to see the full-size image. Right-click and save image as. Now, this is what's important, though. Where we save this flag image needs to be inside the source images for our, where's it at? In class player, there's my flag project. And if I go to the file called source images, this is where your texture maps go. Okay, so I could do that, you know what, just for the heck of things, just because even though I've got that downloaded and I'm downloading that, watch what I'm going to do here. I'm going to type in something else just to show you guys a little bit more. Let's try wood floor. And it's not a very large image, but for our case, it'll work today. Again, you want to typically have larger images. Open a new window. You see it's not that incredibly large, but I'll just deal with it as is. Save image as hardwood floor, and you see it's going to go into that same project folder, source images. All right, so we're done finding little textures and resources. Now let's get back to our tutorial. So first things first, now that we've set our project, build the set, creating a floor, a flag post, and a plane. Now, before I get absolutely into that, though, let's just talk about what this Encloth is all about, okay? So, an Encloth, guys, if I create just a simple plane, okay? I can call this floor if I want to right now, right? Okay, so we have a simple floor. And while we're at it, let's go ahead, just so we can designate this as different than what we're going to make here. I'm going to make that wood texture. Okay, so I'm going to open up my Hypershade. Let's go ahead and grab a blend because I want some shine on it. And underneath, instead of going with color, I'm going to go all the way to the right and choose the checker map, the options map. See? Open that up, choose File, open the folder, see image name, folder, and look, it automatically knows to look for that wood floor in that source image folder. That is why it's so important to set project. Okay? And now all I need to do is I can, two ways to apply this. I can select my floor, right click and hit assign material, or eventually you can get this way. I can middle mouse button drag it on to it. Now you notice it doesn't really show up right now, and that's because I don't have texture maps activated here in my viewport. See? Do that. I'm actually going to turn on my wireframe on it too. And you see now we've got a wood floor. I can even have some fun here and make it look a little bit more appropriate to the size of our, okay? So I've got a wood floor. Nothing so fancy about that. But let's talk a little bit about Encloth. And I'm going to start off with the obvious one. So I'm just going to create another polyplane. Okay? And I'm just going to give this a hint of a rotation so we can see it fall, so it doesn't just fall flat. So we learned about rigid bodies last week, where rigid bodies, under, again, the effects settings and under fields and solvers, we can make something be a rigid body by basically create active rigid body, or just adding gravity, and this thing would fall and collide with the passive rigid body. Well, Encloth works very similar. The difference is that Encloth is called nucleic. And what that means is that instead of the whole object having collision, the individual vertices, so again, if we go to like a right-click vertex mode, now each of these little vertexes that are inside this geometry have the ability of having collision. Think of every vertex is a nucleus with a collision attribute around it, so that now it can actually flex and deform instead of just simply colliding like a hard surface. So the Encloth works, F8, works in this manner here. So I'm in the FX, I'm going to go and find the Encloth right here, and I'm going to create an Encloth, okay, just with that geometry selected. Create Encloth. Now, if I hit the attribute editor, you're going to see I got an Encloth shape. It's got elements for collisions. See, so I can have self-collide, collision layer, what's the thickness of my cloth, how much bounce, friction, or stickiness. If I keep going down, I've got collision properties. I've got dynamic properties like stretch resistance. Okay, so again, maybe I'll turn that down from the default of 20 and say 5. Compression resistance, that's how much something can be squashed. So if you think about that, if this is, cloth can be anything. Cloth could be metal. Okay, you can make a sheet of metal that, like aluminum, that can be crushed, that can be bent, that can flex, but is still rather stiff. Kind of like a sheet of plywood. It bends, it flexes, but you can't crush it, you can't compress it. Whereas then you could also have a sheet of paper that you can compress completely. Or what if it's like a heavy rug, which, you know, can fold up and roll up, but can't actually crush into a ball, but yet a handkerchief or a t-shirt can be completely crushed into a ball. So this is where you have to think about the material type. So you see the default compression resistance is 10. What if I tell it to be 0? That means that this, when I drop this or when I hit play, this is going to hit the ground and try and compress itself or fold itself up, basically, right? We also get bend resistance, shear resistance, restitution. Rigidity is just that. 0 rigidity means it will bend and flex. Full rigidity means that it is a rigid, even though it's an Encloth and it can bend and stretch and collide, it will stay rigid. So even though we learned about rigid bodies with the catapult last week, rigidity can be used, so you can actually, that's what I'm saying, the legacy of collidables with the rigid bodies, the Encloth is the modern version of all this. And then you see we also get deform resistance, right? We've got, mass. So again, how heavy is it? So it can crush something underneath of it. So is it a cardboard box or is it Jello? Okay, let me just hit rewind with what we have here, because we also have some other attributes here called the nucleus. See, there's our shape. Here's our nucleus, and our nucleus has attributes of, transform, rotate, scale. You see, there's gravity already built into Encloth. That's why it's so much more powerful than just a rigid body, because it already has gravity, it always has wind, it already has air density built in. What's air density? I want it to behave like a feather, or I want it to behave like a falling leaf. So it's not going to just fall straight down. It may, swing and blow around in the air a little bit before it lands, because the air is dense. Or if I wanted to make it look like seaweed underwater, it's cloth, it's behaving like cloth, but it's moving almost in slow motion because of the density of the water. All these factors play into that. And finally, you could add noise, wind. And look at this even. Ground plane. I can use a ground plane, which is actually set to 0, 0, 0, which is the origin, which is where my floor is. Or I can turn that off and actually have it physically make this be a passive Encloth. See? Create a passive Encloth. But really, I don't need to make it a passive Encloth if I just simply activate in the nucleus again, use plane, and just use an invisible ground plane. So it's not really colliding with this. It's colliding with the artificial ground plane at 0, 0. Now let's hit play and see what this does. Okay, and you see it basically acted like a piece of plywood. You see that? It actually collided and slid right off. All right, well, let's play around with let's add mass. Let's turn off the rigidity this time. Okay, let's see the difference now. And you see now it almost acted like a rug or a piece of cloth. It kind of collapsed on itself. Okay. What if we come up here and turn off the stretch resistance even lower? So now it's going to act more like a piece of, stretchable material. And let's go ahead and just toss in something for it to collide with besides the floor. So with this selected, let's go ahead Encloth and make this a passive collider. See, and I'll add some friction to it and stickiness. Now watch. See? And the cool part is, every time you simulate it, so now you can almost start to see how you can make things like tablecloths or bedspreads, or cover a car with a banner logo or something like that. And then you could even rip it off. Let me show you what I mean that. Watch if I hit and play and relax this. Okay. Now watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to select the cloth I made. Watch this. End cache. Where am I at? We're end constrained. Where am I at? Solvers. Initial state set for selected. Remember we did that with the drop of the ball, so it started in the cup or the blocks rather. So I'm going to have my cloth start on the ground now. So when I hit rewind and play, it's already on the ground. It's not falling. Solvers. Initial state set for selected. Okay. And now it stays there. Watch what I can do here just to show you some cool stuff. I'm going to go to Vertex. I'm going to grab these little vertices on the corner here. Let's make a constraint. I'll do a component constraint. Let's go ahead and add in time. Watch what I do with this little constraint I built here. Okay, and let's go ahead and really liking that component constraint. Hold on one second. Let me try it differently. Let's put transform constraint. That's what I want. It actually gives me a little gizmo here. So So again, I'm using a constraint of a transform constraint that gives me a little locator, little green locator, and I'm going to key the transform of that constraint at this point. And then I'm with auto key on, I'm going to move it up and out of the way. And that should auto key. Now watch if I hit rewind. When I get to those key points, it should rip the cloth off. See that? Isn't that cool? So now you see how cloth can behave. It basically is, don't think of it so much as cloth. Think of it as a flexible material, right? Because whether it's, you know, objects, how about something like a sphere? Remember we did a bouncing ball, a dropping of a ball here? Well, what if I were to make this be? Let me make my... Okay, so let's go ahead and make this be an Encloth really quick. See, create Encloth. Remember my stretch resistance? Let's say 0 stretch resistance and 0 compression resistance. What's this ball going to do when we hit play? It's going to deform and totally deflate. Isn't that neat? Okay, what if I hit rewind here and gave it a little bit of stretch and compression resistance? Now if I hit rewind and play, it should act almost like, see? Let's put a little more compression resistance, a little more stretch resistance here, maybe just add a hint of, whoops. So you see, you can make these things do a lot of really cool things here. So you can even like drop a character. See, now I'm making it bounce and flex and give a little bit. If I come in and add more mass, it'll actually collide a little bit different with itself now, because now it's actually got a heavier material, see? So I get a little bit more bounce. I mean, I can make a bag of kittens and beat it with a bag, with a stick. You can do just about anything with this cloth stuff. So you can even do geometry. I could take the front end of a 3D car, constrain it to the rest of the car, but make the front of the car actually act as cloth, but make it be something that isn't as, play around with the compression resistance so it has no compression, and I could literally make it look like it dense when it runs into, I don't know, like a wall or a telephone pole, because it is Encloth that's driving it. But the material settings are more like metal or soft metal, or if you think about, things that can bend but yet hold their shape after they're bent. They don't try to revert back to their shape. So let's get back to our tutorial though, okay? So again, let's get back to the settings here. Again, so first we have to make a plane, which we did. Let's create a flagpole. All right. So let's just create a flagpole. I'll just go with polygonal. Cylinder. Let's come to these settings here for a polycylinder. And the height, let's give it something like 12. You can see basically what we have here. It's just a flagpole. Nothing too fancy about it. In fact, I can just put it up like so. Remember our cool little tool here of moving things around is actually hitting the D key. That means I can move my axes to the base, which means now if I were to scale in any direction, it'll scale in the proper direction. So flagpole and floor. Next we're going to make is our flag. Now, which direction should we make the flag? Well, let's use the advantage of our panels here. So I'll hit spacebar. And looks like it is, seeing which one is wide. It looks like this way, which is my side view. And using the side view here, I'm just going to create polygon plane. Oops, not Taurus. I mean Taurus. Create polygon primitive plane. Rotate it to get the exact direction we want it. I'll say 90. Move it up. Move it up. Now, an important thing to take into account, though, when we're dealing with this flag is that the more flexibility, the more realism we want. So, because you think about the material that a flag's made out of is, silk or something like that, vinyl, but it has a lot of flexibility to it, right? It ripples, okay? Now, this currently plane I'm using, you see, is only 10 by 10. Now, if I want this to actually behave more realistic, like it is a large flag, because remember, I'm dealing with a very small scene file right now because I'm making everything the size of the grid, which is only about 20 centimeters by 20 centimeters. Very small. So in reality, to make up for that, instead of doing a 10 by 10, do something here like a 30 by 30. More segmentation, more subdivisions, more flexibility. Now, I wouldn't go higher than that because I could always add a smoother, a subdivisional element over top of that to triangulate that to make it even more smooth. But the performance, I want a little more to do the simulation. But if I go too high than that, now my computer's really going to start to lag. So I'll just leave it at something like 30 or 36 by 36 or 24 by 24 or something along those lines. All right. And you see, I've just moved this up to being near the top of my flag. I'll just give it a little more squish. All right. Now again, remember we had all this issue last week where I'm like, oh, I've got all this movement. It'd be nice to zero all this out. That is, again, modify and freeze transformations. You see it zeroes it out. I could also come here and edit, delete by type history to remove all the inputs that are done. And I could even come here and call this my flag. Okay? Now, let's get this flag loaded up on here. Maybe I'll do it that way right there. Okay? So let's get this flag loaded on. Now, let's go ahead and make it. Now, this is sometimes really important here, is to put the texture on before we deform it. Think about it. What's going to be easier to, texture? Something that's already in a perfect plane, like it was when it was probably, I don't know, made, right? Because when they manufacture this, the cloth is flat, as opposed to modeling and texturing it once it's already, I don't know, deformed and shaped and everything. So let's go ahead and just draw this on. I'll go with another blend. Again, even before I put the texture on, let's go ahead and load up our file folder, flag. Okay, and I'll middle mouse button and drag it on there. Okay, now we see we've got some issues with this though. For one thing, and I'll just minimize my hypershade now to go into my attribute editor. For one thing you notice, oops, it's sideways. Okay, well that's going into our texture map. See, place 2D texture and rotating it the 90 degrees or 270 or whatever it needs. 90 did it. I also noticed that it's flipped, meaning the white is over here, and I believe the white is supposed to be over there, and that should be down here, I believe, 180. And I want to wrap V, mirror you. Okay. In this case, when we got to this point where we've kind of getting this bizarreness, it's almost easier to just, rotate the 90. The power of zeroing things out here is just really cool. And let's just freeze transformations. All right. Now I got it laid out the way I want it. There's also a way here of making it fit slightly better too, which I'll get into, which is in the modeling. And I believe it's in the, let's see, deform, surface, mesh display. I think it's here in the average or conform the normals. One of these is a way of making it just fit the design better, but it looks pretty good right there. Okay, Go ahead and save it for now. I just hit Control S, and I'll just call this flag A. You can give it last name flag A. I don't care, but because you can always rename it. All right. So I know I really don't need a floor right now, right? Because I can, when I make this cloth within the Nucleus, I can assign it to have a virtual floor. So let's just start by making this be a cloth. So I'm again, switch over to Effects, go to Encloth, create an Encloth. And in the attribute editor, Control A, I can call this, flag cloth, or I'll just leave it Encloth shape for now. We'll just leave it alone. Now, if I hit play, let's go ahead to the Nucleus. We're using ground plane already because that was the last time it was set, and we drop it, and you see how it just collapses. See that? It just collapsed on the ground. Well, it actually behaves pretty good like a piece of cloth already. You see how it just kind of falls flat and kind of just lays there? So that does look pretty good as far as the kind of cloth I'm trying to make. However, we need this to stick to our flagpole. So, how do we make it stick to the flagpole? Well, this is kind of like what I showed you before. And again, remember, if you ever need to revert back to create Encloth, passive collider, it's all walking you through in this tutorial. I'm just showing you the way that I'm doing it right in Maya. So to make this hold on to, or constrain as it's called, to the flagpole, I'm going to right-click Vertex, and I'm going to choose Vertex at the top of the cloth. Let me hit wireframe so you can see. So I've selected those three. Let's select the three at the bottom, and I'll select three in the middle here. So if you think about a flag where it's attached to the pole, they usually have those holes, and this is where the rope is attached to the flagpole. So to make that illusion, to create that effect, I'm going to end constraint transform, and you see now it created this green locator here. Okay, maybe I need my outliner here to see. My dynamic constraint is this green locator here. And all I need to do with that green locator is hold Shift, select the flagpole itself, and Edit and Parent. So that constraint is parented to the pole. So those points on the cloth are basically attached to the constraint, and then the constraint is parented to the pole. So now when I hit play, go ahead. You're going to see it's going to hold them. However, what's the problem now? Now the flag is going through the flagpole. And that is why we need to designate the flagpole. So let's just turn off, turn back on. Encloth, passive collider. Now it will bounce off the flagpole or wrap around the flagpole. See that? All right, so right now we've got a flagpole, but it's kind of boring because we have it kind of just falling with gravity. Okay? So what we can do to start to introduce some wind and dynamics to it is find the Nucleus on the flag, see the Nucleus, and start to add, let's add a little bit of air density, wind direction, and wind speed's currently at 0. Now wind direction is in the X direction of 1. X direction of 1. Well, if I look here, where's X? X is pointing at me. So I maybe want to turn that down there. Point 2 towards me. I want it going in negative Z, which is the opposite direction, or the way that my flag is currently pointed. So I'll say negative 1. And we'll add a little bit of wind noise. Wind noise is just some random amount of wind. Now you have to give this wind a chance to kind of pick up and lift this, right? You got to give it a chance to fill in. Maybe add a little bit more wind speed. See, I'm hitting play and letting it chug through here. Maybe a little more wind speed. Maybe a little more wind speed. And see, now I've got it up. But you have to let it fall, simulate, and get into position before you get it to be the shape you want. So what I can do here now that I like it what it looks here, watch this. I'm going to stop with the flag selected, come here to the solver, once again, initial state, and set the initial state for the selected. I don't want to see, it's kind of like going all the way back to the candle flame. I don't want to see the candle flame start. I want to see the candle flame already on, just like the flag. I don't want to see this flag fall and then come to life. have the flag already come to life. Have it already, so we're going to initial state, set for selected. Now, when I rewind, it's already in that position and looking like a billowy flag in the wind. Okay, let's go ahead and turn that texture map back on. See? Look how natural that is. See? You cannot simulate that by hand. It's impossible. It's already looking pretty good. And again, it's when it returns back to 0, it's going to already be in action mode. It's not like just frozen. I'm kind of liking that right now. Now watch what I'm going to do. Remember I said to make this look a lot more like flexible cloth, I can always add, under modeling, a tessellation, or edit mesh, let's see, mesh, I'm looking to smooth, see, add a smooth, and now you can see how many divisions I can add here to make it even, whoops, no. And by adding that now, it's going to look even more smooth and dynamic. But the simulation of the Encloth is only using the 30 by 30. When I render this now and view it, it's actually doubling. It's adding a tessellation or a subdivision smooth value of 2. So now I'm actually not, it's 30 times 30 times 30. So it just gives you much more flexible, smooth kind of effect there. All right. Now again, I can go ahead and I can add some lights to this, right? Just like I've shown you before, where I can go to and turn on my film gate to know exactly what I'm getting here. I can add in more lights if I want to render this out. One thing I will make here without showing you full-fledged rendering like we've done before, but just going with what we have here, is many of you are giving me a Play Blast, which is an uncompressed AVI. And that's why some of you are having trouble uploading that, because the Brightspace has a limit of 2 gigabytes. Well, if we're doing 300, 400 frame animations here, that's too big. So if you do the Play Blast, right, remember, without even going into the settings, I can go right to my Windows, right to my Play Blast option box here. But if you choose an AVI with no encoding at 100% and the scale and all that, right, it is going to be enormous. If I just hit Play Blast there, it's going to be a very, very large video file because it is an uncompressed AVI. Stop sending me uncompressed AVIs because it takes me an hour just to download. Make sure if you're doing an uncompressed AVI, send it into After Effects, send it into Premiere. You could send it into Adobe Media Encoder, and you can convert it to an H.264 MPEG-4. The difference usually, as I've seen, is that the uncompressed AVI might be 800 megabytes. It might be 1.2 gigabytes. And the version which is an H.264 is all the way down. It's down to like 1 megabyte. So stop with the H.264. Remember, all I have to really do here is just open Adobe Media Encoder. Now, where did that video file go? It went into, where's my banner flag project. It went into the movie section, which right there, that's my Play Blast. I can just simply drag that into Media Encoder here. See, there it is. And then come in and say, yes, double click on the H.264. That might say QuickTime, that might say AVI. Just choose H.264, match the source high bitrate, or choose some other 1080 setting. Maybe I'll choose high quality 1080. And you see it actually did change it. Now it's a true 1920 1080. Change the output name. And again, I can put it in the movies section or wherever I want to put this final video, right? Let's see. Last name, flag, save. I can even turn off audio if I want, because I don't have any audio. That actually makes it slightly small. You see, this is estimated to be 31 megs. Remember, 31 megabytes. I hit all those OKs, and finally I hit the green arrow to execute it. Well, this is 400, okay, there's your example. The Play Blast, which is an uncompressed AVI, is 444 megabytes. The H.264 version is 12.9 megabytes. That is okay. 12 megabytes might take, I don't know, 3 minutes to upload to the Brightspace, whereas the 444 megabytes would probably take about 25 minutes to upload. So you tell me which is better. And the quality here, even though it's an H.264, you see is perfectly fine. See? So right there, guys, that's the flag tutorial. I hope you have some fun with it. And there's a lots more you can read up, and some of those, like, you can even rip and tear. You have this flag tear. You could have objects collide with the flag. You could attach the flag to a boat or a car. Like, I don't know, make some jacked up little pickup truck, and when the car moves, the flag moves, right? It goes with it by simply parenting the flagpole now to the car. And so now what's driving is not necessarily wind, it's the movement and the thickness of the air. So that's all I got for you today, guys. Have some fun with this. Come on, get me out of here. Have some fun, and I will get in touch with you with the next tutorial. Please read up on a lot of this stuff, and I look forward to you guys and your submissions. Thank you very much, guys. Take care.